Okay, class, picking up where we left off at, we would take the square root of 3 times square root of 6, which would give us square root of 18, and square root of 3 times the square root of 3, which gives us a positive square root of 9. Now we could take out the highest perfect square out of square root of 18, which is the square root of 9, and that will leave us the square root of 2, plus the square root of 9. So we would have 3 square root of 2 plus 3 as our final answer. Now we come here to 38. Before we take any square roots, let's see if we can simplify anything. So 5 and 45, they both have 5 in common. This will leave you 1. This will leave you 9. So our denominator so far has a 9. We only would need to write the 1 if everything else simplifies. X to the 7th over x cubed will leave us x to the 4th. And then y to the 3rd over y to the 5th will leave us y squared in our denominator. So we will have the square root of x to the 4th all over the square root of 9y squared. Square root of x to the 4th is x squared. The square root of 9y squared is 3y. So our final answer is x squared divided by 3y. Now we go to problem 39. We would take 6 minus the square root of 11 times 6 minus the square root of 11. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times the negative square root of 11 is a negative 6 square root of 11. Negative square root of 11 times 6 is a negative 6 square root of 11. A negative times a negative is positive. Square root of 11 times square root of 11 is the square root of 121. So we had 36 minus 12 square root of 11 plus 11. 36 plus 11 is 47 minus 12 square root of 11. And this is our final answer. Now we come to problem 40. Problem 40, we could pull out our highest perfect square. So we have 7 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 3 plus the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. So we have 7 times 2 square root 3 plus 5 times the square root of 3. So we have 14 square root of 3 plus 5 square root 3. So we add 19. I don't know what happened to the screen right there, but we would end up with 19 square root 3. And that would be our final answer. Now we will start on problem 41. We have to add 5 to both sides of the equation. We have the square root of x plus 2 is equal to 6. Now to get rid of the square root, we must square both sides. And we will have x plus 2 is equal to 36. We subtract 2 on both sides, and x is equal to 34. And that is the final answer for problem 41. Now we go to 42. We have the square root of 2x minus 1 is equal to 7. We need to square both sides. And we will add 2x minus 1 equals 49. We add 1 on both sides. And 2x is equal to 50. We divide each side by 2. And x equals 25. So that is our final answer. Now we go here to problem 43. Now 43 is a little different because we have a square root on one side and we have a binomial on the second side. So we still would square both sides to get rid of the radical. So we have 4x plus 9 is equal to x minus 3 parentheses squared is the same as x squared minus 6x plus 9. Now we will subtract 9 on both sides and also subtract 4x on both sides. So we will have 0 is equal to x squared minus 10x. Now we could factor out an x and we'll be left with x minus 10. So we'll set x equals 0 and x minus 10 equals 0. So we'll add 10 on both sides and we have x is 10. Now I didn't say this in the previous two problems, but you're always supposed to check your final answer in the original equation to see if it works. So if we put in 0 for x here, this would be 0 plus 9, which would give us positive 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. We put in 0 for x here. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. And we know that the square root of 9 would not give us negative 3, so we have to get rid of the x equals 0. Now we're going to try 10. 4 times 10 is 40, plus 9 is 49. The square root of 49, we know is 7. 10 minus 3 is 7, so we know 7 equals 7. So our final answer here is just x equals 10. Now we go down here to 44. We have parenthesis y minus 5, parenthesis squared equals 40. So we would take the square root of both sides of the equation, and we'll have y minus 5 is equal to positive or negative. We'll take the highest perfect square out of 40, which is 4. So that'd be square root of 4 times square root of 10. So we have y minus 5 equals to positive and negative 2 square root 10. So we will add 5 on both sides, and our final answer is equal to 5 plus or minus 2 square root 10. Now we look at problem 45. We take the square root of both sides. We will have 5z plus 6 is equal to plus or minus the highest perfect square in 75 is 25. And we will have 3 left over. So we have 5z plus 6 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 25 is 5, square root 3. So we'll subtract 6 on both sides, and we will have 5z is equal to negative 6 plus or minus 5 square root 3. We divide each side by 5. And our final answer is z is equal to negative 6 plus or minus 5 square root 3 all over 5. Now, we scroll to the next problem, which is 46. Now with 46 here, we need to do factoring. We will have our a, which is 2, our b is 12, and our c is 5. Now we will multiply a times c, which will give us 10, and the factors of 10 are 1 and 10, and 2 and 5. Now, if you notice here, we have a situation. If you notice, we do not have 2 digits to add together that would give us this 12. Now, since we cannot factor, we must use the quadratic formula, which is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now we substitute in the values. We have our a, b, and c, so we had an opposite. B is 12 plus or minus the square root of 12 squared minus 4, a is 2, and c is 5, all over 2 times a is 2. So we had negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 144 minus, this will give you 40, all over 4. So we would have negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 104 all over 4. Now we have to look at what is the highest perfect square that we have in 104, which would be 4. So it'd be negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 26 all over 4. So we would have negative 12 plus or minus 2 square root of 26 all over 4. Now if you look here at these 3 terms, they all have 2 in common. So we can divide all 3 of these terms by 2, and we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 26 all over 2. And that is the final answer. Now we go back up here to problem number 47. Now with 47, the first thing we need to do is subtract 1 on both sides. So we will have 5x squared plus x minus 1 equals 0. Let's just use the quadratic equation. So we have a is 5, b is 1, and c is negative 1. So we have x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we have x is equal to the opposite of 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 5 times negative 1 all over 2 times 5. So we have x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared is 1, negative 4 times 5 is negative 20, times the negative 1 is positive 20. And that's all over 10. Now 1 plus 20 we know is 21. So we have x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 21 over 10. And we're done. Now we come to problem 48. We have z times the parentheses z plus 6 plus 4 equals 0. So we'll multiply z by this parenthesis first, which will give us z squared plus 6z plus 4 equals 0. Now we can still use the quadratic formula. We know a is 1, b is 6, and c is 4. Now, we have x is equal to the opposite of b, which is 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, to be 6 squared minus 4. A is 1, and c is 4. All over 2 times a is 1. Now, we will have x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times 4 is negative 16 all over 2 times 1, which is 2. So we have x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 20 all over 2. Now the square root of 20 breaks down to the square root of 4 and the square root of 5 all over 2. So now we will have x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus 2 square root 5 all over 2. Now negative 6, 2, and 2, they all have 2 in common, so we need to simplify that. And we will have x is equal to, this will give us negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 5. And this is our final answer. Now, we go back up here to 49. Now with problem 49, we take 2x plus 1 parentheses squared, which will give us 4x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 49. So we will have to subtract 49 on both sides. And we will have 4x squared plus 4x minus 48 equals 0. So our a is 4, our b is 4, and our c is negative 48. So we have x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And as you see, all we're doing is substituting. So we will have x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of, we have 4 to the second power, which is 16. We have, first of all, we have a negative times a positive times a negative, which we know is positive. Now, we can use our calculator to multiply 4 times 4 times 48, which gives us 768. And this is all over 2 times 4, which is 8. So we will have x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 784, all divided by 8. Now the square root of 784 is 28 all over 8. So now we will have negative 4 plus 28 over 8. And we will also have negative 4 minus 28 all over 8. So x would be 24 over 8, comma, negative 32 over 8. So our answer here would be x is 8. No, this is supposed to be 24 over 8. So x is 3, and negative 32 divided by 8 is negative 4. And that is it.